Soft traditional music, the clinking of dishes, and laughter echoing through the house. I used to believe my home was perfect. A husband who provided, a family that smiled for the world, and a sister who always stood by me. But perfection is just an illusion, one that shatters the moment you blink. It started subtly, lingering glances, whispered conversations that stopped when I walked into the room. I should have seen it then. But love makes you blind. My sister-in-law, Chioma, had been restless. I saw it in her eyes, the way they darted away from me when I asked if she was okay. "Sis, there's something I need to tell you," she said one evening, her hands shaking. But before she could speak, my husband, Udoka, walked in. His gaze locked onto hers, a silent warning. "Not now," he said, voice firm, lips tight. And just like that, whatever she had to say, whatever secret burned on her tongue, was swallowed. I should have pressed harder. I should have forced the words from her lips. Instead, I let it go. Until the morning she threw up in the kitchen. "You're pregnant," I whispered, staring at her in disbelief. Chioma's lips trembled, her eyes filled with unshed tears. "It's not what you think." I laughed, a short, bitter sound. "Oh. Then tell me, who's the father?" Silence. The air between us thickened, suffocating, the only sound the distant caw of a crow outside. Then, she dropped the bomb. "Udoka." I felt my heart crack, splintering into a million jagged pieces. "You're lying," I spat, stepping back as if her confession would taint me. "I tried to tell you," she whimpered, hands trembling. But he wouldn't let me. My vision blurred with fury. I stormed into our bedroom, where Chike sat like a king on his throne. "Is it true?" I demanded, my voice raw. "Did you force yourself on my sister?" He didn't flinch. Didn't even look guilty. Instead, he smirked. "You were always too blind to see the truth." Rage burned through me. But the horror wasn't over. As if my shattered world needed more cracks, I found out the maid, Amoka, was pregnant too. "For the gateman," she muttered, eyes cast to the ground. Udoka laughed. At least she was honest about who the father is. Unlike some women in this house. I lunged at him, my nails digging into his skin, but he caught my wrist with ease. "You're not needed here anymore," he whispered. And just like that, he threw me out. Weeks passed. I was gone, exiled from the home I built. Then, out of nowhere, he showed up. "Ndidi," he sighed, feigning regret. I made a mistake. I stared at him, at the man who tore my world apart, and felt nothing but ice in my veins. "Go to hell, Udoka." He smacked, stepping closer. "I already live there." "But you still love me, don't you?" I walked back into that house, not for love, but for vengeance. The moment I stepped in, the truth spilled out like poison. Chioma's pregnancy. A scandal. The maid's affair. A disgrace. And Udoka. The puppet master who thought he could control it all. But I was done being controlled. "You think you can walk back in here and take over?" Udoka scoffed, his voice laced with arrogance. I smiled, slow and sharp. "No, I came back to burn it all down." I turned to Chioma, her belly swollen with his child. "Do you still love him?" Tears streamed down her face. "I never did." Udoka's confidence wavered. Then the doors burst open, his mistress, his enemies, his failures, all stepping in to witness his downfall. And as he realized the world he built was crumbling, I whispered my final words to him. "Enjoy your kingdom of lies, my love." I walked away, leaving him to drown in his own destruction. But something lingered in the air. A feeling. A warning. This wasn't the end. Because a man like Chike, he never stays down for long. And I wasn't done playing the game. It had been months since I left Udoka in his ruins, and life had moved on, at least for me. I had rebuilt myself, piece by broken piece, until the wounds became scars. But the past has a way of creeping back, like a shadow lurking behind you when you least expect it. Then one night, my phone rang. I answered, and the voice on the other end sent chills through me. Did you think it was over? Udoka. The explosion rocked the street outside my house. Smoke curled into the air, flames licking at the wreckage of what used to be my car. A warning. A message. I clenched my fist. If he wanted war, he would get one. Chioma sat across from me, eyes hollow, hands cradling her swollen belly. I should have listened, she whispered. He's not done destroying lives. I leaned closer, my voice sharp as a blade. Then let's make sure he never gets the chance again. Her eyes widened. What do you mean? I smiled. It's time he feels the pain he so easily dishes out. Udoka had taken another lover, Zainab, a woman as ruthless as she was beautiful. But Zainab wasn't stupid. She knew men like him always had a downfall. So when I sat across from her at the candlelit dinner table, offering her power in exchange for betrayal, she listened. You want to be his queen? I asked, sipping my wine. Or do you want to own his entire kingdom? Her lips curled into a smirk. Tell me more. Udoka's business was his pride, his empire of wealth and deceit. But every empire has weak spots. And his. The law. I gathered evidence, fraud, bribery, stolen money, enough to bury him. When he got the anonymous tip, his face paled. He knew. And that's when he called me. You did this, he growled. I laughed. This? Oh no, my love. I'm just getting started. The police raid came first. Then the lawsuits. Then the betrayal. Zainab left him. Chioma testified. His so-called friends turned their backs. And just when he thought it couldn't get worse, I walked into his crumbling mansion in a black dress and red lipstick, like the ghost of his past. Surprise, I whispered. He lunged at me, but I stepped back, watching him collapse under the weight of his own downfall. You ruined me, he bellowed, eyes wild. I tilted my head. No, darling. You did that all on your own. I should have left. I should have walked away with my victory. But men like Udoka, they don't die quietly. He had one last move left. One last trick. And as I turned to leave, he pulled out the gun. Bang! I woke up to blinding white lights, my body aching, stitches pulling at my skin. Chioma sat beside me, eyes red from crying. You made it, she choked out. I smiled weakly. Did he? Her lips pressed into a thin line. He's gone. But as I closed my eyes, I couldn't shake the feeling. Somewhere, somehow, he was still out there. Waiting. Months passed. I healed. I moved on. Or so I thought. Then one night, as I poured myself a drink, a note slid under my door. I picked it up, my pulse hammering. The handwriting was his. Did you really think this was the end? The note in my hand felt heavier than paper. Did you really think this was the end? My pulse thundered. Udoka was dead. Chioma saw the body. I saw the blood. But ghosts don't send letters. I stepped back, my eyes darting to the shadows. Was someone watching me? Or was I losing my mind? The next day, I went to the police station. I demanded answers. Are you sure the man you buried was Udoka? I asked. The officer scratched his head. The body was unrecognizable. burnt beyond recognition. I froze. What about the DNA test? A pause. A long, suffocating pause. It was never done. I had underestimated him. Udoka had always been 10 steps ahead. I dug through old records. I paid off hackers. I tracked his offshore accounts. And that's when I saw it. New passports. New identities. One stood out. A man named Daniel Okafor. The face. Udoka. He had faked his death. And now, he was haunting me. If Udoka wanted to play dirty, I would outplay him. I walked into the club where he was hiding in plain sight. My dress clung to my body like sin, my heels clicking on marble floors like a countdown to war. He sat in a VIP booth, surrounded by money, women, and power. I felt his gaze on me before I even turned. His lips curled into a smirk. You should have stayed gone, my love. I smiled sweetly. So should you. Game on. I needed bait. A weakness. A new betrayal. So I hired a woman. Someone who could lure him in. Her name was Jasmine, beautiful, deadly, and just as hungry for revenge as I was. Make him trust you, I told her. Then destroy him from the inside. She smiled, red lips parting like a promise. Consider it done. What I didn't expect. Jasmine had her own agenda. She didn't just trap Udoka, she fell for him. And then, she betrayed me. You used me, she spat. Now, he's mine. I laughed. Darling, you don't know him. He's only yours until he no longer needs you. She didn't believe me. Not yet. Udoka thought he was untouchable. He thought wrong. I leaked every secret he ever had. Fraud. Murder. His hidden family in another country. Then I went for the kill. His entire empire crumbled overnight. Accounts frozen. Businesses seized. Enemies closing in. And when Jasmine realized he was only using her, she came crawling back. Too late. Some betrayals, I whispered, are unforgivable. Udoka had one move left. Cornered, desperate, he came for me himself. I waited. I let him find me. He raised the gun. And that's when Chioma stepped out of the shadows. She didn't hesitate. Bang! One bullet. One final betrayal. Udoka dropped. Chioma exhaled, her hand steady. He's finally gone. I looked at her. Are you sure? A week later, I sat on my balcony, sipping wine. The headline read, Business Tycoon Udoka Okeke shot dead. It should have been over. But then, my phone buzzed. A message. From an unknown number. Did you really think I wouldn't have a backup plan? I dropped my glass. The war wasn't over. I couldn't breathe. The letter in my hands shook as I read it over and over again. Your son is alive. My son. But that was impossible. I never had a child. Or so I thought. 15 years ago, before the lies, the scandals, the betrayals, there was one night. One mistake. One life-altering secret. I had been young, foolish, and deeply in love. But my love had come at a cost, a pregnancy I never knew about. Until now. And the worst part. Udoka knew. He had known all along. I tore through old records, searched for any trace of him. The boy. My son. Gone. Hidden. Erased. The only person who knew the truth. A woman named Momatiga. And she had been dead for years. Or so I thought. The address led me to a small village. The house looked abandoned, but I knew better. I knocked once. Twice. Then, the door creaked open. A frail, wrinkled woman stared at me. Her eyes held stories too heavy for words. "You should not have come here," she whispered. My skin prickled. "Tell me about my son." She sighed. "You were never supposed to know." Mama Tiga finally spoke. "Udoka took the child. Raised him under a different name. Hid him where no one could find him." My stomach dropped. "Where is he now?" A pause. A dark, heavy silence. Then she whispered, "He's closer than you think." I staggered back. No. It can't be. But it was. My own son had been standing next to me all along. I thought Udoka had been my biggest enemy. But I was wrong. There was someone else. Someone Udoka trained. Someone he molded in his image. Someone who had been watching me, working with me, living in my world. And I never even knew. "You don't recognize me, do you?" The voice sent chills through my spine. I turned. And there he stood. The boy I had never known. My son. Now a man. Now my greatest enemy. "You abandoned me," he said. I opened my mouth. "No, Udoka lied to you." But he didn't care. His eyes were cold. "You ruined my father. Now, I ruin you." It wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about survival. I had lost Udoka, but I had gained a new enemy. One I could not kill. Because he was my own flesh and blood. And he wanted me dead. I will win. I must win. Because if I lose this war, I will lose my son forever. But then, he turned to me one last time. "This is just the beginning." I barely had time to process my son's betrayal when the final knife twisted into my back. A shadow stood in the doorway. The perfume. The poise. The deadly silence. And then she stepped forward, the woman I had long buried in my past. I froze. "No." She smacked. "Hello, my dear." The room spun. Because standing before me, alive and well, was the one person I had sworn was dead. My own mother. "You were never supposed to find out," she said, sipping her tea as if my entire world hadn't just shattered. "You planned this." She didn't deny it. She just smiled. "Your son. I raised him. Your husband. I controlled him. Every single piece of your life was always mine to break." My hands shook. "Why?" I whispered. Her smile widened. "Because I wanted to see if you'd survive." I had spent years fighting men. Betrayal after betrayal. But I had never expected this. The final betrayal. Not from a stranger. Not from my husband. Not even from my son. But from the woman who gave me life. "This isn't over," I breathed. She tilted her head. "Oh, I know." I stepped toward her, my fist clenched. But before I could strike, she whispered. "There is one more secret left to tell you." I froze. "And this one will destroy you completely." A mother orchestrating every betrayal. Unthinkable. Now the war isn't just revenge, it's deeply personal. My mother's lips curled into a knowing smile, her eyes glittering with amusement. "You think you've suffered betrayal," she whispered. My fist clenched. "Just tell me." She leaned forward. "The man you married, the man you loved, was never yours to begin with." Silence. "What are you saying?" My voice shook. She tilted her head. "He was never meant for you, my dear." She laughed softly, taking another sip of her tea. "He was mine first." The room spun. "Lies," I whispered. She smiled. "Truth." She reached into her silk robe and pulled out a letter, aged, yellowed, stained by time. Read it. I snatched it from her hands, my fingers trembling as I unfolded it. And then I saw it. The writing was his. To my dearest love, it began. Not addressed to me. Addressed to her. I gripped the letter. Shaking. No, this can't be. She sighed dramatically. Oh, but it is. He loved me first. He was mine. And you? You were just a replacement. My knees buckled. All this time. Every fight. Every betrayal. Every lie. I was living inside a love triangle I never even knew existed. I looked up at her, my world collapsing. She smiled, so serene, so pleased with my suffering. Do you see it now? She whispered. The truth. I couldn't breathe. I had fought for him. Killed for him. Bled for him. And all this time, he was never even mine. A slow rage built inside me. Not the fiery rage of heartbreak. Not the pain of betrayal. But something colder. Darker. My mother smirked. What will you do now, my dear? I picked up the dagger on the table. Gripping it tight. I met her gaze and smiled back. Something you never expected. To be continued. Thanks for watching, and if you haven't subscribed yet, kindly do so for more fascinating stories like this one, and see you in the next one.